I think one of the things you've seen with the evolution of service residence is the gamut of offerings from the low, and I don't mean necessarily in quality, but in price with Airbnb to the high, AKA. I think where we have positioned ourselves is to be more like the five-star hotels, that it's the five-star version in the service resident industry where we're assuaging the cachet for location, for luxury, for comfort, for anonymity, privacy. We have the food and beverage, but it's private to just the residents. We have the very high-end wellness facilities, again, private to just those residences. We work with the Fretes and the Bulgaris to deliver those five-star experiences, but in the framework of a private residence. So it's more like condominium finishes as opposed to apartment finishes with those higher end finishes and services and amenities that you'd expect in a high-end resort. So I think if you took the gamut of the service resident industry, we've positioned ourselves at that high end. And it was important when we first got to New York because the concept of a furnished apartment was a few units in a apartment or condominium with a lockbox, with a mattress shoved against a plaster wall. So there wasn't the same recognition of cachet tied to a furnished apartment. So we had to come in and build a very strong brand identity with AK. People had to see the contemporary vernacular of the architecture. They had to see the high spirit of the design. They had to see that it assuaged their need for privacy, for luxury, for location. So it took a little time to do, but I think we've cemented or fortified that perception or that standing within the service residence industry. I think what's important is that we grow at a tortoise pace, but we continue to move forward. So we've opened up about one new property per year. There's an opportunity this year to expedite that process, and we want to do it in a very thoughtful, meaningful way. And the locations that we're selecting are locations that we've been working on for 4, 5, 6 years. So we want to add a sixth property in New York. We want to add a second property in Los Angeles. We would like to add a new property in Miami, and we would like to add a second property in Washington, D.C. We would also like to add a second property in London. So those have been our strong targets. We're also looking at properties on peripheral locations: Baltimore, Seattle, Boston, San Francisco, Chicago. But we really want to build around New York as the center of AKA and identify locations that are synergistic with New York, the entertainment industry in LA, the financial segment within London. We also always envisioned AK to be a global offering, and have always felt that the service residence in general has been better understood by people in Asia or Europe than Americans who travel for 3, 5 days, stay at a traditional hotel. I think people from outside of the country have wanted to come in and experience the culture, the spirit of the city. They stay for a month, they seek out a residential experience. So I think the growth is to go global, but first to really fortify the key locations within the United States that are very global in spirit and in travel. You see it in the demographics. So that's our first priority. I think that's a great question. I think Airbnb has been a positive for two reasons. One is it shows where the younger set are heading. They want to have this residential experience. They want that value proposition. They don't mind sharing someone else's home. They're willing to be open for the experience. So we learn from that. That mindset for the next segment. You always want to skate to where the puck's going to be. I think we've targeted a different group that's a little farther away from the Airbnb. I think the positive also is it shows a global acceptance for a residential living or lifestyle over a traditional hotel. So those are two of the positives.